Hi, I'm Valerie Engelhart, and in this video I am going to be painting a blue anemone flower with lovely green foliage around it. So I'm going to be pulling paints from my Rockwell Canada palette, and I am starting off with a Princeton snap brush, a Filbert size 8. It is a very large brush, and I enjoy working with large brushes when I have a large subject. I'm just loosely, intuitively painting in some petals using Rockwell Canada Deep Soul. It's a cool pale blue with like reddish brown undertones. And you can see as the paint starts to split, there are those patches of reddish brown. And I just thought it was cool, so I picked that color. I am going to be using a limited palette of about 5 to 6 colors. For this flower, I am using the blue. I will be dropping in some sparkly angel's eyes, which is just another light blue, but it's very shimmery. Right there. So it doesn't pick up on camera necessarily super well, but in person it does give a nice shift in tone, as well as, I mean, anytime I can reasonably add bling to a painting, why not? Now for this anemone, those petals aren't super smooth and flat, so I did wiggle my Filbert brush when I was making those petals. And I'm going in now with a little bit of Cosmic Sound. It is like a deep navy blue, and just dotting it in the middle of the flower to create a shadow. Once that flower is dry, I will go in and paint the center of the flower, but if I go in and do that now, all of that paint is just going to disperse. So it's one of those cases of gotta let it dry, moving on. I am using On It Diamond Yellow, which is a nice light green, to start putting in the stem, as well as the stem of the foliage that I'm going to put around this flower. Now, I don't want it all to be one flat color, and one thing I like about Rockwell Canada paints, at least all of the ones I have, I'm I'll get this right. I'm mostly using the paints in the Magic set. And so some of these will, kind of like that blue color, will break up into a few different colors, and they're really pretty. Highly recommend them. But I'm also going to go in with Lima Green Brown, which is a cooler green. Kind of feels like a bit of a misnomer. And then a little bit of Cleopatra Green, which is just an even cooler version of green. That way we get a variation of greens throughout this entire piece, just to give some instance of light and depth and shadow and just visual interest. Plus, it's more fun to paint. I've got my size 8 round brush, a silver black velvet brand, and to paint these leaves, I am just flicking my brush quickly, light pressure, heavier pressure to light pressure, just over and over wherever I see a space where I want to add a leaf. And then switching up the paint color as my brush runs out of water. And it's kind of meditative, just standing up, stretching out my arm, flick, flick, flick of a green. Now let's do this green, now let's do that green. Over and over, just being one with this study. That made it sound oddly deep, but really it's just a bunch of flecks of paint that are fun to watch as they merge and pool into each other. And even at this point, like, I could probably stop here and be happy with the leaves. But I've already put the stems up at the top, so we are going to keep going with these leafy vines. And if I notice a gap, just put in another stem and more leaves. But notice, I'm not perfectly painting these leaves at all. They are just brush marks. But with the way that I've done them, the colors used, and the context of a flower being there, our brain immediately fills in that these are leaves. And that's one of the fun things about painting loosely. You just need to give enough information for the brain to fill in the gaps. Now at this point, I've realized that I want to go and add some of that Deep Soul blue into the leaves. Having some of my main color pop up in other parts of the painting is just it works really well in a composition, especially such a loose one such as this. So just in a couple places, go pop that blue color and have it nicely fuse wet into wet. And don't just vary up the color of your paint. So I've got 3 different greens going on, but I can also vary the intensity of the paint, how much water I use. I could have done all of this in just one color of green and still had it look incredible. I'm also incredibly impatient though, so drying time would have bugged me. But just with the intensity of your paint, you can get that variation of light and dark. But for a lot of us, it's a lot of fun to dive into some of those extra colors. It's just so much fun watching the paint bleed into each other. That's the whole fun of wet in watercolor. Going in with more of my deep soul now and popping it at the end of some of the leaves. Just for visual interest, it could be the illusion of some buds, but I just felt like I wanted to dance around with that lovely cool blue. A little bit here, a little bit there. Just placing that color down wherever I feel the intuition to do so. So I'm not really making a conscious decision of like, oh, mathematically, I should make sure I have this amount of color here or there. It was just, I want to put some blue here. Let's do a mark here. That looks pretty. All right, the center of my flower is dry enough now that I have gone back into my Cosmic Sound, which again, like a deep navy or indigo color. And the center of these flowers are heavily textured, and so I'm not just painting a circle, I am dotting the tip of my brush in the form of a circle, but that way there are lots of like little gaps in between my dots, just so that it mimics the look of an anemone. Gosh, I'm gonna try and say that 5 times fast. Though not on the mic, you don't need to endure that. But with anemone flowers, they do have that center that expands beyond the dead center. What is that? Like little pistils or something? Anyway, more texture, more dots, like orbiting the sun. I put them in, and then I'm just gonna have to let that bit dry. All right, painting is dry, and even though with this being a loose flower, I can leave it as it is, I do want a little more separation between the petals. So I'm going in and I've taken a light value of the Cosmic Sound color. And so it's that same deep dark blue as the center, but I've added a lot of water to it so that it's still that color, but not as intense. It can become a nice gentle shadow. But because it is my focal point, I do want more detail on this flower than, for example, I do in its surrounding leaves. And for these, you just have to imagine where that petal starts and stops, since they all did fuse together after the initial first wash. Just find where there's that separation between 2 petals, decide which one you want in front, paint that line, and then bleed that line into the petal that is going to be in the back. So of the 2, pick which side needs the shadow and paint on the shadowy side. And I decided to deepen the shadow, but I didn't really like it, so I started to lightly lift some of it away. And one of the qualities of this paper, which is a Fabriano student grade paper, I think it's 1264, but anyway, it's a very accessible paper, and I like it quite a bit, but it lifts very easily. So if you put down a shadow like I did on the one petal and you don't like it and you go to lift it, you will end up lifting more than you intend to, especially because these paints, being granulating paints, they're a little heavier. These paints aren't really staining. So whenever you go and lift pigment, you might lift off more than you intend. So it's a good quality and a bad quality. It's both. It depends on what you want to do. And that really comes into just knowing your materials, knowing your paper, knowing your pigments, and how they interact, so that you can choose what works best for how you want to paint. I'm going to finish some of this up with gouache. I'm using a teeny tiny little brush and just dotting some fresh from the tube gouache along that flower center, just to give it a little bit of like sparkle, a little more dimension, and call more attention to it. And here's the finished painting. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up so I know to make more like it. And if you have any suggestions of what you want to see me paint in the future, drop a comment below. I'm always looking for more subjects. If you want to see more, subscribe because I make videos every Monday and Thursday. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye!